This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
It was July 18th of 2014. It was a hot summer Friday in Tallahassee, and for most people, it was just another morning. For Dan Markel, a brilliant Florida state law professor, it was supposed to be a turning point. A day when his divorce attorney, Stephen Webster, would file what he's described as damning paperwork against Wendi Adelson. The kind of filing that could change the course of a custody battle and maybe even the rest of Dan's life. Big day. Lots of planning for this. Lots of debate going back and forth. Lots of getting ready to present your case and prepare for the fallout that could very likely happen when the information you bring to someone else is not exactly going to make them happy. And he knew Wendi, he knew Donna, he knew the whole family. He wasn't unfamiliar with their narcissistic lifestyle and their lack of ability to process, comprehend, and then act on information in a healthy sort of way. Just a skill set that he knows they don't have. But when you are dealing with someone who don't have that sort of skill set, then you have to go to the law. Then you have to go to your attorneys. Because if they're not going to play by just the basic rules of life or human decency or what's best for the child, you have to get legally involved. So that's what he did. After all those months, all those instances where the kids are coming back and they're telling dad about how grandma hates you and you're taking away their sunshine. And now we know on the back end of that, Donna is sitting there plotting, dressing the kids up in Hitler youth uniforms. He was going into a firestorm. He knew that. What he didn't know is that before noon, he would be dead. Dan was gunned down in his own driveway. 2 bullets to the head, fired point blank range. And to Stephen Webster, the timing has never been a coincidence. He believes that what was about to land in court that day may well have been the final trigger for the Adelson family to act. Pardon the pun. Dan and Wendi's divorce had been finalized in 2013, but the fighting just did not stop. And we know more of why. Donna's meddling, Wendi not being able to say no to her mom or even recognizing what a monster she is. Or could it be even worse? That's the question we're trying to figure out the answer to. Keep in mind, Wendi has not been charged with anything. She is innocent. At least as of right now. When the fighting did not stop, it got worse. At the heart of the battle were 2 young sons. Wendi wanted to relocate the boys to South Florida, where she'd be closer to her parents, Donna and Harvey, and her brother, Charlie. And Dan refused. His career was rooted in Florida State. His life was in Tallahassee. And he believed uprooting the children would sever his bond with them. Plus, you're uprooting the children. If you're going to uproot the children, it should be for something that's going to benefit the children, not the grandmother. Her consideration shouldn't even be in this conversation, yet they are, because Donna inserted herself into this situation. As if it was completely normal for a grandmother to be dictating any of this stuff between Wendi and Dan Markel. And we now know just how much Wendi was being egged on by her mother. The disputes, they grew vicious. Court records show years of back and forth over visitation schedules, parenting agreements, and financial obligations. By the summer of 2014, Webster says Dan was preparing to strike back in a way that would finally put Wendi on the defensive. Webster has described the paperwork as damning, while he has not laid out the full text publicly. The contours are clear from the surrounding record and his own interview on Surviving the Survivor podcast. The filings allegedly included motions to restrict Wendy's custody or visitation, pointing to evidence that she was not following court orders, allegedly, interfering with Dan's parenting time, and manipulating schedules. Again, these are all the allegations. By filing for sanctions or restrictions, Dan could put her credibility before the court and shift the balance in his favor. Well, they didn't like that. There were also contempt claims. Webster suggested that they were prepared to show that Wendi had allegedly violated prior parenting orders. Judges don't take kindly to repeated defiance, and contempt findings can directly reduce a parent's custody share. The paperwork may also have gone after financial exposure. Wendi was living largely on the support of her family. By drawing into that open, or drawing that into the open, the filings would allegedly highlight the Adelsons' deep involvement, the family, not just in paying her bills, but in driving the custody fight. That meant exposing Donna's control and Charlie's behind-the-scene role. And perhaps most damaging of all, Webster implied the findings included evidence painting Wendi as unstable or manipulative. Shocker, I know. In custody battles, a parent's conduct is under a microscope. These sort of findings could have brought that conduct into the harsh light of a courtroom record. And for Dan, this wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. He wanted to protect his relationship with his children and make sure the court saw what he believed was happening behind the scenes. That is the most important thing he was doing. He was looking out for his kids. And Donna, Wendi, and Charlie, they're looking out for themselves. But they won't make them feel good in that moment. Notice the utter lack of seeming concern for the hellscape that they created for their children, grandchildren, nephews to live in by their actions. We're all waving the flag of, we're doing it for the kids. It's the best thing for the... Everything actually seems to only benefit us, but we're doing it. And our hate for Dan, because we have to be vitriolic and right. Well, wave this flag, it's for the kids. Well, what are you doing for the kids? Well, we're taking them out of their schools and their friends and away from their family that love them and moving them down here to live near Donna and Charlie and his friends from across the tracks. How is that better than the stable life they're leading up there? Ask Donna. Oh! I'm doing what I think is best. Let's put the kids in a Nazi uniform. Show Daddy what's up. Unstable, broken brains across the freaking board in the Adelson family. For Wendi and her family, the implications were devastating. If the judge accepted any of Webster's arguments, it could have meant less custody, tighter restrictions, or even formal sanctions. And they deserved it. It was just out of nowhere, we don't like Wendy's parents. No, they certainly instigated this happening, and a responsible parent doesn't sit on the sideline and go, oh, you just tell my children whatever you feel like telling them, you neurotic bitch. No. He stood up because he gave a damn about what was happening with those kids. Not so much the Adelsons, though. And for the Adelsons, whose obsession was keeping the boys close in Miami, it would have meant a permanent loss of control. Dan dropped his children at daycare that morning. He drove home unaware that a rented Toyota Prius was following him. As he pulled into his driveway, Sigfrido Garcia and Luis Rivera ambushed him. 2 shots to the head. Back at Webster's office, the filing sat ready. We have everything prepared to file, Webster recalled. And that's the day they killed him. To him, this was unmistakable timing. This wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. It was coordination. The paperwork represented an existential threat to Wendy's custody case and to Donna and Charlie's ability to control their grandchildren and Wendi. By eliminating Dan, the Adelsons eliminated the Filings. In hindsight, with Donna and Charlie Adelson both convicted in the murder plot, the motive becomes chillingly clear. Custody leverage was at stake. The Filings allegedly threatened to erode Wendy's custody rights. If she lost ground, the Adelsons lost access. Exposure of family interference was on the line. By pulling their financial and emotional manipulation into the public record, the Filings could have embarrassed and implicated Donna and Charlie in ways they could not afford. And most of all, there was the fear of permanent loss of control. If Dan gained the upper hand, the dream of relocating the boys to Miami would be gone forever. The Adelsons had already joked, or not so joked, about hiring a hitman. Wendi herself admitted to police she'd once told Charlie had once told her that he'd buy her a hitman. It's cheaper than, or buy her a TV rather than getting a hitman because it was cheaper. By July 2014, those jokes were no longer jokes. And keep this little nugget in mind. You don't typically find criminal action. Well, you do sometimes. But it's not super. You don't find this sort of criminal action in a custody hearing. You just don't. The idea that you're going to somehow dig up any information on Wendi or on Donna and Charlie in this custody hearing, slim to nil. But if you keep digging, and if they were to dig, if they were to investigate, if they were to get into discovery further, which this could have gone because the Adelsons seemed to wanted to fight, but they're too stupid to realize that their devices might be looked at, which could very easily happen in a case like this. Take murder out of it. Say he's still alive. They could have just as easily found the plot to kill Dan had he survived, and all these people would have their names stapled right to the top. So they had an interest in not letting the legal system dig further into their business as well, since the plans were this far in motion, literally in motion the day of when these things were supposed to be filed. Stephen wasn't just an attorney looking back on a case. He was Dan's friend. He knew his routines, his priorities, his fears. And when he learned that Dan had been executed in broad daylight on the very morning their filings were ready, his gut told him the truth. Was it them? It's a question one has to ask. To him, the filings were the spark. The Adelsons saw what was coming, and they acted before the ink could hit the page. The state's case against the Adelsons has always centered on motive: the bitter custody battle, the desire to bring the boys to Miami, the resentment of Dan's refusal to cooperate. But you don't have to cooperate with something that's going to take your children away from you. That's not cooperation. That's not refusal to cooperate. That's holding your own. That's saying, no, I'm good. What we have in place is what I'm following. Moving my children away from me? No. The idea of refusal to cooperate almost makes Dan, in some ways, feel like he's not participating. He's not playing along. And to a certain extent, sure. But you don't have to play along with someone that's rewriting the rules of the game. And Dan had every right to say, I'm not going to cooperate in you retooling the rules of this so I can have less time with my children and you can say horrible things about me to them. But in the world of the Adelsons, that's A-okay. It wasn't just about long-term frustration. It was about the day, that filing, the legal blow that was about to land. And that makes the murder even more chilling. It wasn't abstract. It wasn't delayed. It was allegedly a preemptive strike to stop the legal system from taking control away from them. Webster now runs a law firm in Tallahassee with Louis Baptiste, one of Dan's former students. Outside his office, the sign reads, "Justice for Dan." For Webster, this case will never be just another file in a cabinet. It was personal. It was the silencing of a friend, the destruction of a family, and the corruption of justice by arrogance and entitlement. And for the Adelsons, the irony is brutal. The filings they allegedly feared never reached the judge's desk, but their desperation to stop them only deepened the case against them. The evidence, the wiretaps, the convictions, all of it stems from that single morning when fear of losing control drove them to murder. Dan Markel's children grew up without their father. His colleagues lost a scholar. His friends lost a confidant. And Stephen Webster lost a client whose fight was cut short before it could be heard. The paperwork that never reached the court may be gone, but its shadow lingers. It represents the fork in the road between legal combat and criminal conspiracy, between fighting for custody and plotting for murder. And it raises the most haunting truth of all. Dan Markel was murdered not just for who he was, but for what he was about to do, for the papers he was ready to file, for the challenge he was ready to make. On July 18, 2014, a father was silenced so his children could be controlled, and a family's obsession with power became their undoing. Tell me your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi to find us. Let me know your thoughts. Obviously, like I said, Wendi, never been charged. She maintains her innocence. But we'll keep asking questions. I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.